Sure. My name is Saul Kaye. I'm the CEO and founder of iCAN, Israel Cannabis. We're ecosystem builders. We started in the cannabis space in Israel about 5 years ago and helped to build a new way of talking around cannabis and how to approach this both as a medicine and an industry, and had some success around the world. And today we primarily go to governments, go to the industry and find synergies between various companies, incubate great ideas in the cannabis space, and put on awesome events that educate people about cannabis and the wonders of cannabis medicine and how it's going to change the world.
So we're at some auspicious news here at the end of 2018. The Israeli parliament has just passed an export law. Can you share with us what that means? What are the prospects for the prime minister signing that into law, and what does that portend for us in the coming months?
Sure. So it's another step in a long process that's been going on for a long time. It's not the end of the process. It's not like tomorrow we can export. But the Knesset, our ruling parliament at the time before it was dissolved, said we, unanimously want export to happen. Now it's the police jobs to go and make that happen. So the last thing that has to happen is Bibi has to sign it into law. But now there is no, the focus is maybe on getting reelected. I don't know if that's going to happen before the coming elections or whether we're going to have to wait. And I think cannabis is going to be a major issue in the upcoming elections. So right now, what does it mean? It means there is a desire from our cabinet, from our legislator to make sure that export does happen. I don't think we're going to go backwards and have to revisit that. There's a clear desire, that Israel continue to be a leader in this industry. And I think that it's now just a matter of playing out the end of the chess game, having everything signed and sealed, and then export will happen. At the same time, you have to remember that the companies here in Israel are not scaled up yet for export. We've all been waiting to see how it's going to play out. Lots of promises from the side of the government, and it took its time. But I think that's going to give these companies now an opportunity to begin scaling for the massive demand that exists overseas.
So fascinating. The Israeli approach to medical cannabis has been almost 180-degree opposite of what we see here in the United States. Obviously, Israel was a pioneer back starting as early as the 1960s in identifying THC and working to unlock the medical implications. And you've approached it from a systemic point of view, meaning that we have Israeli hospitals and physicians and the medical establishment, if you will, working in medical cannabis. Compare and contrast that with the U.S., which has had a patchwork of grassroots sort of voter initiatives that have empowered cannabis, but not really provided the infrastructure for medical research. How are those two systems coming together, and where does export and what exactly are we talking about in terms of export moving forward?
Sure. So, the first part is what's unique and what's worked about Israel is that we didn't have the noise of recreational market. We had a research focus, help the really sick. And it wasn't easy to get. It's really complicated and you've got to be really ill to get it. So there are lots of holes we can poke in the Israeli system. It's not perfect. But what it did do is say, patient first, let's give them some medicine and see what happens. And over time, help to develop an infrastructure that allows for that. And now are really moving into the new phase, what they promise, of doctors being educated, pharmacists being educated, and it becoming just like another medication in the arsenal of, the toolkit of doctors to use. So from a perspective of understanding both the regulator side, yes, it takes time to regulate this to allow the stigma to dissolve. Also, over time, we've seen more clinical trials that have proven that it works and that it helps and that it's sometimes better than pharmaceuticals. And all of this is added to sort of a tipping point at this time where we can now all say, well, how come it didn't happen 10 years ago? Because we didn't have the amount of information we had. So stigma was much stronger. So all of those things happened. And that's what happened in Israel. And it's one of the places where you've got 2 degrees of separation, sometimes even 1 degree of separation. So Professor Meshulam in Jerusalem needs something that's been done by Dedi Meiri in the Technion. That's a 2-hour drive. So, everyone knows everyone. We're all family. Also, from a patient perspective, people in Israel know a patient that has received medical cannabis for cancer. It's probably a grandmother, one of your grandmother's friends. And they've seen it helping, and it's been, around a lot. So that singular focus of helping patients, even though there's a bureaucratic nightmare in order to get it, I think has given Israel a leading edge. Now, it's why do countries need Israeli cannabis? From a U.S. perspective, California doesn't need Israeli cannabis, but as countries start to look at regulating cannabis, they are going to institute their own regulations. They take 6 months to 12 months to write. Then they're going to put out a tender. Then everyone's going to start. You're talking 2.5 years of no cannabis in a country as they begin to regulate. So what do you do with those patients that currently need cannabis that has been proven in Israel to work for epilepsy or for Crohn's, for Parkinson's, for, not the things that we're investigating here in Israel? And you get to a point where net exporters have a market for the next, at least very short term, say 1 year to 5 years, of entering new markets. And we also have knowledge both in growing cannabis, turning it into medicine, dosing it, doing clinical trials, that knowledge is something that we're transferring overseas. So both we're a net exporter of knowledge and a net exporter in the end of cannabis product.
So put some numbers in terms of that. How big is the Israeli medical cannabis physical cultivation, the physical production these days? How much cannabis is being produced in Israel?
It's a really good question. So the old numbers before this whole new regulation came in were 8 growers with a capacity to supply the market at that stage had about 30,000 patients, around 10 to 12 tons. The new capacity of Israel is in the hundreds or thousands of tons. So that's going somewhere. It's not going to be diverted to the black market in Israel. It's not going to be a recreational play in Israel. That is all slated for Germany, Czech Republic, Europe, Australia, etc. In terms of money, they're saying that it's $2 billion worth of industry in the next 2 years. In terms of numbers, and I've seen numbers up to $33 billion in the next 5 years. So it's a large industry.
And the 33 billion, that's inclusive of intellectual property. Is that really the big opportunity? I mean, what I've been really excited about watching the progress in Israel is the legitimate medical research. As you know, because of federal prohibition, while we have robust legal cannabis markets here in the States and getting bigger and adding every day, and that is changing, we really are behind the gun. And so I'm looking at sort of the immediate opportunity for U.S. and quite honestly, our brothers to the north, the Canadians, are very aggressive, as you know, because they have the public markets. They are investing in production, investing in IP. So to what extent can the Israelis help to jumpstart that legitimate research here in North America? And then tell me why you're looking at markets like Panama for example, and investing time and energy there?
Sure. So the first question, what does Israel offer to the big Canadian and US companies? Accelerated access to patients, to data. I can begin a clinical trial very quickly in Israel. We've already got patients using cannabis, so we can see what that does for another condition. We're an active, innovative startup nation. So what we're seeing in our startup world is quite differentiated for what I'm seeing at MJBiz. As an example, we're really, IP-driven tech companies, the same as we did in cybersecurity, and the same as we did in the car automotive space,
Right.
and in so many other industries. We're disrupting here as well. So, my deal flow, I think, is better than what we're seeing in the US. We're not focusing here on, I'm a vertically integrated cannabis company and my specialty is I'm going to be a lifestyle brand. Well, that's everyone. Oh, and I'm going to be GMP. Can you imagine people going to a pharmaceutical conference, standing on stage and going, I'm super proud, I got GMP, right?
Yeah.
We're way beyond that conversation here in Israel. So yes, of course you need those standards, but yeah, we're really going to disrupt this.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. I want to, and thank you for all your time. I really have a couple of last questions. Talk a little bit about standards, because it is something that plagues the industry. First of all, we've been spending most of our time this morning talking about medical cannabis, but the implications for industrial hemp, for example, and not to mention the consumer packaged goods and all the implications of the recreational and adult use market. It's a very wide horizontal opportunity with lots of bifurcation, if you will, lots of segmentation in terms of the channels and the audiences. Tell me a little bit about those standards. You're talking about the GMP, which is something that has opened up international cannabis. When it comes to medical, when it comes to defining those standards, how do activities and research in Israel sync up what's going on with folks at GW Pharmaceuticals, or what the FDA is looking at now with some relaxed and revised policies? How do we get a hold of standards so we can all invest properly?
So, the government system here of what they call the 5 books, he calls it the Green Book of setting up nursery, cultivation, production, distribution, and patient under separate licensing. What is similar to vertical integration in Canada. Here in Israel, the focus has been that this is just like every other medicine. It is dispensed in pharmacies by a pharmacist. It is considered a narcotic. So we have no aspect of a recreational market. This is a serious medicine. You need to, get serious doctors behind your treatment and your pharmacist to be involved in your treatment. So that's how it's playing out in Israel. So it's less of a recreational focus, but definitely more on the medical. So the standards also, if you've got an immune compromised patient that's taking an inhaled product of cannabis, we better be sure that has no mold and pesticides. So the standards for pharma are just more rigid than the standards for food. Cannabis as a food will have its one standard. Cannabis as a pharmaceutical will have its standard. And that includes a standard of how you grow it, how you process it, how you clean it, obviously packaging, distribution, security, all those things around cannabis. Those all need their regulations. What iCAN can do as a company is come in before a government is regulated and help them get good regulation and a process that makes sense from an industry perspective and a security perspective. Remember, the 2 most important things we want to do is make sure that there's no diversion, that we're not supporting a black market, and make sure that the quality is good. And if we do that, then the black market disappears and we get good cannabis regulations. Right. So we as a company come in to try and help governments do that.
Fantastic. Here we are at New Year's Eve. What are your predictions for 2019? What does medical cannabis in Israel look like 12 months from today?
That's a good question. I hope that we've doubled our patient numbers. We have published all of the claims that have been made, because it's very easy to say, I'm doing a cannabis study, and there are 200 of those going on right now. I want to see that data published, because that what will push sort of cannabis 3.0 in new countries that can now say, the data is there, the clinical trial has been done, and then Israel will help to move cannabis forward everywhere.
And Israel, iCAN, where will you be in 12 months from today? How many markets? You've got three aspects to your business. You've got the service aspect, the R&D, you've got the incubator, and you've got your event, your CannaTech stuff. Where do you see sort of the emphasis for your company in the coming year?
Sure. Well, we, as a thesis, go after the emerging markets. So that's why we're going to Panama. Latin America is forgotten with cannabis right now. There's 550 million people down there who will consume cannabis in the next year through legal channels. So Latin America is very important. Africa, CannaTech's going to go to Africa towards the end of 19. Also, Africa is heating up and going to be a very interesting market. Both of those markets are driven by low-cost production of cannabis, which could decimate, what's going on around the world. It's going to become very interesting to see how those new markets affect the more established markets, and will be in Europe as well. So, staying out of the US right now, there's a little much noise in the conference space, and really focusing on the new emerging markets. So we'll be looking at Italy, in Europe, and somewhere in Africa, and we're about to be in Panama in February, which is going to be an awesome show. You should come down.
Fantastic. How do folks get a hold of you? What are you looking for? You're looking for investors? You're looking for intellectual property? You're looking for governments? Where's your business development focus?
Yeah, across all three. So if you'd like to attend a CannaTech, sponsor a CannaTech, let us know. That usually goes through Joshua. If you have intellectual property or a company, an idea that you're looking to incubate in the cannabis space, and it has an application for a global effect, don't come to me if you want to be a grower in Oregon. That's not the type of deals we're looking for. And obviously investors who want a pipeline of early stage companies that are going to disrupt this industry for the next very long time, come to me. I've got an awesome portfolio of companies looking for support.
Fantastic. Saul Kaye, CEO, founder, iCAN. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Cheers.
Thanks, man.